Your company has operated in China for 80 years, and yet even Coca-Cola faces these bumps and hiccups. Back in 2009, you wanted to buy a Chinese juice company. You thought you had a deal. The Chinese government said no. Does the Chinese government unfairly treat international companies, specifically U.S. companies, operating within its borders?
John, thank you. First, I'd like to really pay tribute to President Obama for pulling that meeting of U.S. and Chinese CEOs together with the two presidents, himself and President Hu, today. I thought the mood there was very frank, very friendly, very open, dynamic, and positive mood in order to improve conditions for investment in both countries, for businesses, innovation policies, improve innovation policies in China, also lift some restrictions on M&A, some of those things that there are still a lot of opportunities about. And we still feel that as China brings more and more people into the middle class, it is going to be great for China, it's going to be great for the United States as we export more, because let's also remember, in the last 10 months, Chinese exports to China from the United States have been growing at a clip of about 30+%, highest rate of growth of exports to any country.
Answer the question of an average American who's sitting maybe in Michigan, maybe in Wisconsin, maybe in North Carolina, who's looking around and saying, we used to make toys here, we used to make furniture here, we used to make XYZ here, and my manufacturing plant is gone. And yet those products are now coming in from China, but the President of the United States complains, other CEOs complain, and they would sit there and say, if our companies are not being treated fairly in China, why don't we slap tariffs on Chinese products coming into the United States just to make a point, just to get that level playing field?
I think what we have to look at it is a new dynamic relationship, not just one where everyone is producing their own goods, but one where Chinese companies can come invest here and create jobs for the United States. I'll give you another example, John, of Coca-Cola's investments in China, how those investments are also creating jobs right here in the United States. One example, we have a large, dynamic, growing juice business in China because there's more Chinese middle-class consumers. We have set up a $100 million plant in Auburndale, Florida, last year, opened it, and that has created an additional net 165 new jobs in that town in Florida, and creating many more indirect jobs because we're processing all our oranges from Florida growers, processing pulp and orange juice concentrate, and shipping it exclusively to China to satisfy the needs of our growing business in China. That's a great example of how an investment in China, an overseas market, is a win-win, both for China and for the United States.
That is a positive example, and yet you also hear many not so positive examples. The president himself raised the concerns of Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, who says for every 10 copies of Windows sold in China, one of them is actually manufactured by Microsoft. The rest are rip-offs, copycats. We hear that from the parent company of CNN is Time Warner, and they would say that you can find rip-off copies of Harry Potter and other big movie products that this company needs to make a profit on to be successful. And the Chinese government shrugs and says, well, that's happening somewhere, but it's not us. And yet, you know full well from operating in China, the Chinese government has a hand in just about everything. Did you see in the meeting today a commitment to do a better job with what we call intellectual property protections?
Yes, I think we saw a commitment in mid-December when the Chinese Vice Premier Wang came here for the JCCD discussions. There was some progress made, and we heard again today a lot of further understanding of those issues that were being raised by both the U.S. administration as well as U.S. companies.
I asked you lastly, you mentioned the one example of your own company, the operations in Florida, and that is a hopeful example, but you understand the mood in this country with near 10% unemployment, a recession, now just trying to climb out of this recession. When you travel the country, as I did a lot over the last couple of years for my work, a lot of people think that we get the short end of this stick, that China gets most of the benefits in this economic relationship. Do you see evidence, and if you do, please be as specific as possible for somebody out there watching saying, here we go again. The Chinese president comes to the United States, they're talking about economics, I'm going to get screwed here and they're going to benefit. Explain to that person how this might get better.
Well, there can't be a better metric than a 30+% growth in exports in the last 10 months of last year. That is the highest growth rate of exports that we do to any country. So there couldn't be anything better than that as a proof point.
Muhtar Kent is the CEO of Coca-Cola. Sir, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.